The summer of 1943 near Leningrad was a scorcher. In the marshes around Pogostia, the grass had grown tall, and the thick green of the woods hid the soldiers' graves. We would scrounge for berries and mushrooms when we could, just to put something in our bellies. In the forest, not far from the front line, the 311th Rifle Division was regrouping. After the February attempts to break through the German defense in the Pogostia pocket, almost no one was left in the division. It was being replenished with whoever was available. I, too, ended up in the division among those who had recovered from their wounds in hospitals. I couldn't return to my artillery regiment and now faced the fate of an infantryman, to be killed or wounded in the very first battles. I understood this perfectly well, and we had been observing the 311th for 2 years already, as we constantly supported them with the fire of our guns. Perhaps other divisions were similar, but the 311th seemed like an especially terrible meat grinder. Thousands of wounded were transported to the rear through our position. As we advanced, we found piles of corpses of soldiers from this division. I even had the chance to meet the commander of the 311th. Once, during the heavy winter battles of 1942 near Pogostia, our major was sent to the 311th to coordinate artillery support plans for the infantry and to hear the division commander's thoughts and wishes regarding the organization of the battle. I accompanied the major with a rifle over my shoulder. In a forest clearing, we found a guarded dugout protected by multiple layers of logs. A shell couldn't penetrate it. When the major poked his head inside, clouds of steam burst out. It was very cold, and we heard a deep, authoritative voice cursing. I peeked through a crack in the frozen tarp that served as a door and saw a drunken general in the light of an oil lamp, sweaty, with his tunic unbuttoned. On the table stood a bottle of vodka and various foods, lard, sausages, canned goods, bread. Nearby were piles of gingerbread, bagels, and jars of honey, gifts from Tatarstan to the valiant and heroic Soviet soldiers fighting at the front, received the day before. A half-naked and equally drunk woman sat at the table. "Get the hell out of here and close the door," the general yelled at our major. Meanwhile, the 311th was dying and dying near the railway tracks of Pogostia station. I don't know who that general was. Generals were often removed for failed battles back then, but soon appointed to another division, sometimes with a promotion, and the divisions kept dying and dying. 1943, a warm summer, and for me, glorious days were passing. In the forest, under the sun, without much drilling. However, I had to go through 3 weeks of training at a sniper course, target practice, studying the optical sight, sniper tactics. The lessons from an experienced instructor made a particularly strong impression. Using a dummy, he trained us, honing techniques for killing a man with a knife. Vulnerable spots were marked on the dummy, and we stopped, cut, and struck while crawling and jumping around it. The instructor showered us with streams of profanity, and in between, he told us stories about his escapades with women in the city of Vologda. Having become a sniper, I was nevertheless appointed as the commander of a squad of submachine gunners, and there was a shortage of junior commanders. Here I got more than I bargained for, to the point of tears. As a result of the battles, the squad ceased to exist. My service in the infantry was interspersed with stints in artillery. We were given a captured 37mm gun, and I, as a former artilleryman, became its gunner. When this gun was destroyed, they brought in a domestic 45mm piece, and that's where I got quote-unquote covered, Such is the story of my glorious service in the 311th Rifle Division during the Mga operation of 1943. Before battles, we were presented with the division's banner. For a long time, various parades and drill trainings were conducted in a forest clearing. Passing in front of the formation, the colonel searched for 2 assistants to accompany the banner. But the division was dominated by stooped older men or those who had just recovered from wounds, half crippled. Unexpectedly, I turned out to be the most suitable, probably because of my numerous medals and guard's badge. The only thing that didn't sit well with the colonel in my appearance were the old puttees, greyish, worn, with fringe, all in unwashable dirt and dried blood from previous battles. "Change them," the colonel ordered. I went to the quartermaster's, from where I was sent away empty-handed. "The old ones are fine," they told me. The next day, the colonel cursed me terribly and again ordered me to change the puttees. I went to the captain, the supply chief. A ruddy man in a new, tightly fitting tunic emerged from a sturdy dugout. He had apparently just eaten a hearty meal and was picking his teeth with the match. I sat at his feet, right next to his shiny chrome boots, re-wrapping the issued puttees. He looked through me benevolently from above and spoke leisurely. "Why do you need new puttees? You will be killed anyways. The old ones are fine. Why are you demanding?" I humbly replied that it didn't matter to me, of course, but the colonel ordered it. The review went off brilliantly. A general arrived, drunk as a skunk. The head of the army's political department or something like that. In a hoarse, booze-soaked voice, he said something, the band played, we marched, lifting our legs high, stomping loudly on the dusty ground, and were even filmed by a visiting cameraman. Somewhere in the film archives, there are frames capturing my person in a new puttees by the banner. After that, we could go into battle. The fighting began on July 22nd. In the morning, we heard the cannonade. This was the start of the artillery preparation near Sinavina. The objective of the offensive was to cut off the German positions at Sinavina, take Mga, and strengthen the connection of the semi-blockaded Leningrad with the country. The troops were well equipped. There were many tanks, planes, Katyusha rocket launchers, and automatic weapons. Ammunition was brought in enormous quantities. Sometimes in a day, they would fire shells at the Germans delivered by 2 or 3 trainloads. It was hellish bombardment. The earth shook, smoke obscured the sky. But as soon as the infantry went into battle, the German positions came alive, and division after division fell at the foot of the Sinavina hills. We managed to advance 100 or 200 meters, covering the shell-poked ground with bodies. Everything was plowed up, not a single bush, not a single blade of grass, just scorched earth, corpses and torn metal. In the reports, this was called battles of local significance, and in works of the history of the war, it's characterized as an operation to wear down the enemy and divert forces from Leningrad. That's how it was. But we took neither Sinavina nor Mga, laying down several corpses in the nearby swamps. Although we were used to everything at Pogostia, it turned out to be even more terrifying here, as the scale of the battles and the intensity of the fire were unprecedented. Soldiers who came as reinforcements from Stalingrad claimed it was easier there, but in the history of the Leningrad siege, these battles are just a forgotten episode. On July 22nd, a new phase of fighting kicked off near Sinavina. Our division stayed put around Pogostia for the time being, with just 1 battalion sent out on a raid. At dawn, these troops crossed the Dubok Creek, and launched a surprise attack on the German earthworks in the swamp, seeped into the depth of the German defense, killed several enemy soldiers and hacked an officer with an entrenching tool who had managed to take down several of our men with his pistol. After advancing about 150 meters, the attackers were stopped by fire and took cover. After about 3 hours, the battalion was cut off by attacks from the flanks. By evening, it was all over. Only the moans of the wounded could be heard from beyond the stream. Meanwhile, the entire division was moving up to the front line, in full view of the Germans, showing the enemy the intention to renew the attack tomorrow. I remember the twilight, the ominous sunset, and us running across the swamp on a hollowly thumping boardwalk of round logs. Mines were exploding around us, shrapnel and bullets were whistling. Smoke was billowing. This was how we tried to disorient the enemy about the location of the offensive in our sector. We were demonstrating, or, as one chief of staff rephrased with soldierly sharpness, menstruating. He meant the heavy losses we suffered. Then the division rested in the forest again. We spent a delightful week on spruce branches under a canopy of raincoats. We slept for a whole week, day and night, waking only to eat or from the explosions of a nearby bomb. A month later, on August 15, already at the end of the unsuccessful Sinavina operation, the regiments made a night march to the north and entered into battle near the Apraxin post station between the villages of Tortolova and Gaitolova. The initial trench began under a small railway bridge across the Nazia River. It has survived to this day between the stations of Apraxin and Nazia. For a long time, there was a cemetery here, on the embankment next to the rails, near the bridge, where several hundreds of the killed were buried, those who could be dragged from the front line. Over time, the graves overgrew, the posts with names disappeared, and now no one knows about this mass grave. The division then advanced about 200 meters, and after a week, bloodied, was withdrawn from the battle. The operation ended. I found myself in the hospital again. I can't forget the dawn before the battle. It was about 5 in the morning. We were moving up to the front line across open ground. As dawn was barely breaking, the front was waking up. Guns started firing, the distant horizon lit up with explosions, smoke billowed. Fiery zigzags were drawn by the reactive shells of Katyushas. The German cow was hiccuping loudly. Noise, thunder, screeching, howling, booming, hooting, a hellish concert, and on the road, in the grey mist of dawn, infantry trudged to the front line. Row after row, regiment after regiment, faceless figures hung with weapons, covered by hunched raincoats. Slowly, but inexorably, they marched forward to their own doom, a generation walking into eternity. There was so much generalizing meaning in this picture, so much apocalyptic horror, that we acutely felt the fragility of existence, the merciless march of history. We felt like pitiful moths, destined to burn without a trace in this hellish fire of war. About one of the subsequent battles, I have a fragment of a note made then, in 1943, in the hospital, under the immediate impression of events. Here it is.